I'm not much for telling what happens to me on the road, but this thing I lived through, friend, I can't get it out of my head. And believe me, I've seen strange things in my 24 years behind the wheel, but nothing like this. At first, I thought it was just a simple ride like so many others. But what came after was something else, something that even today is hard for me to believe, and that's why I tell it. My name is Ray Kowalski. I'm 52 years old, and I've been rolling on these highways for almost a quarter century. My house is a midnight blue Peterbilt 579, worn but reliable, with which I've crossed the Midwest from Nebraska to Colorado more times than I can count. That night I was coming down from Kansas City heading to Omaha with a load of furniture, without hurry but with the promise of a morning pickup in Des Moines. Everything was calm, too calm, I'd say. The Nebraska night air was crisp for October, the kind that makes you grateful for a warm cab and hot coffee. And me, well, I was half disconnected, thinking about my daughter Sarah, about how I hadn't called her in 2 weeks. When I pulled into the Flying J truck stop on Interstate 80 outside Omaha at 1:30 in the morning, I was looking forward to 6 hours of sleep before my next haul. The parking lot was mostly empty except for a handful of rigs and a few cars scattered near the building. I found my usual spot toward the back, away from the diesel pumps and the constant hum of refrigerated trailers. As I set my air brakes and started my shutdown routine, I noticed her. She was standing near the dumpsters at the far edge of the lot, just outside the reach of the security lights. At first glance, she looked like any other stranded traveler, maybe waiting for a ride or trying to figure out her next move. But something about the way she stood, the way she kept looking toward the trucks, made me pay attention. In my years on the road, you develop instincts about people, and mine were telling me this woman was in trouble. I tried to mind my own business. Lord knows I'd learned that lesson the hard way over the years. But as I settled into my sleeper cab and pulled the curtains, I kept glancing out at her. She was pacing now, and even from a distance I could see she was agitated. Her hands moved constantly, running through her hair, wrapping around herself like she was trying to hold something together. I was just about to close my eyes when she started walking toward my truck. My CB radio was quiet, and the parking lot had that eerie stillness you only get in the dead of night at truck stops. She walked with purpose but also desperation, like someone who had run out of options and was about to try something that scared her. When she knocked on my passenger door, I knew my night was about to get complicated. I cracked the window first, just enough to hear her speak. She was younger than I'd thought, maybe mid-30s, Hispanic, with dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore jeans and an oversized sweatshirt that looked like it belonged to someone bigger than her. But it was her eyes that got to me. They held the kind of desperation I recognized from my own mirror during the worst days of my divorce. "Please," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need help. My children are gone." Against my better judgment, I opened the door. She climbed up into the passenger seat without invitation, and I could see she'd been crying. Her hands shook as she fumbled in her pocket for something, finally pulling out a crumpled piece of paper. "My name is Elena Vasquez," she said, smoothing the paper on her knee. "This is a restraining order against my ex-husband, Marcus. He took my children 3 days ago. Emma is 8, Diego is 6. The police say they can't help because it's a custody dispute across state lines, but I know he's going to hurt them." I looked at the paper. It was official looking, with court seals and legal language, but the lighting in my cab made it hard to read the details. What I could make out was her name and what appeared to be an order of protection. "Ma'am," I started, but she cut me off. "He's taken them to Denver. I know because his sister lives there and she's the only family he has left. I don't have a car, I don't have money for a bus ticket, and by the time I figure out how to get there, he could move them again. Please, I'm begging you. I know truckers sometimes help people, and I saw your truck has Colorado plates on the back." I didn't have Colorado plates, but I didn't correct her. She was studying my face like her life depended on my answer, and maybe it did. You need to call the police, I said, or Child Protective Services. They have ways of handling this kind of situation. Alina shook her head violently. I tried. They said since we share custody and there's no immediate evidence of abuse, they can't issue an Amber Alert. They told me to hire a lawyer and file paperwork. My babies don't have time for paperwork. She pulled out her phone and showed me pictures. Two beautiful children, the girl with Alina's dark eyes, the boy with a gap-toothed grin. They looked happy in the photos, the kind of happiness that made you remember why family mattered. I have gas money, she said. I can pay you for the miles. I just need someone to drive me there before it's too late. I should have said no. Every instinct I developed in my years of trucking told me to call the authorities and let them handle it. But something about Alina reminded me of Sarah when she was scared as a little girl. The way she used to look at me like I was the only person in the world who could fix whatever was wrong. I've got a pickup in Des Moines in the morning, I said. Please, Alina said again. If you were a father and your children were missing, wouldn't you want someone to help? That's when she got me. Because I was a father and I'd failed at it more times than I could count. Maybe this was a chance to do something right for once. Denver's a big city, I said. How do you know where he took them? Alina's face lit up with the first hope I'd seen since she'd knocked on my door. His sister Maria lives in Montbello. I have the address. He doesn't know I know about her, so he'll think it's safe. I looked at the restraining order again, then at Alina's face, then at the photos of those two children. In that moment, sitting in my truck in the middle of an Omaha parking lot at 2 in the morning, I made the decision that would change everything. We leave now, I said, starting my engine. But first thing that seems off about your story, first sign you're not telling me the truth, and I'm taking you straight to the nearest police station. Alina nodded so hard I thought her neck might snap. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much. As I pulled out of the Flying J and merged onto Interstate 80 heading west, I had no idea I was driving straight into a nightmare that would make me question everything I thought I knew about helping people. In my rearview mirror, the lights of Omaha faded behind us, and ahead lay 600 miles of highway and the biggest mistake of my trucking career. The first hour on the road felt normal enough. Alina sat quietly in the passenger seat, staring out at the Nebraska plains rolling by in the darkness. She'd stopped crying, which I took as a good sign, and occasionally she'd give me directions even though we were just following Interstate 80 west like any other night run I'd made 100 times before. But somewhere around the Grand Island exit, things started feeling off. You'll want to take Highway 30 instead of staying on 80, Alina said suddenly. It's more direct to Denver from here. I kept the truck on the interstate. Lady, I've been running this route for 15 years. Interstate 80 to 76 is the fastest way to Denver, trust me. Alina shifted in her seat. Marcus knows the truck stops on 80. He might have people watching for us. That got my attention. What kind of people would your ex-husband have watching truck stops? She was quiet for a long moment. He used to drive truck himself, before we got married. He knows drivers, knows how the network works. Something about the way she said it didn't sit right. Most truckers I knew were decent people who minded their own business. The idea of some organized network helping a guy hide stolen children sounded like something out of a movie. How long did Marcus drive? I asked. 5 years, maybe 6. He did a lot of cross-country runs, mainly freight. That's how he knows about Colorado, about places to hide. I glanced over at her. In the green glow of my dashboard lights, Alina looked different than she had in the truck stop. Less desperate, more calculating. She was studying the CB radio setup, looking at my GPS screen, taking in details about my truck like she was memorizing them. You seem to know a lot about trucking yourself, I said. Alina's laugh sounded forced. You pick things up when you're married to a driver. Marcus used to tell me about his runs, about the different routes and which truck stops were safe to park at overnight. We pulled into a pilot station outside North Platte around 4 in the morning. I needed fuel and coffee, and Alina said she wanted to use the restroom. While I was filling the tank, I watched her through the store windows. She was talking to the night clerk, gesturing toward my truck, showing him something on her phone. The conversation went on longer than it should have for someone just asking directions to the bathroom. When she came back out, she was carrying 2 cups of coffee and a road atlas. "Thought you might need caffeine," she said, handing me a cup. The clerk was helpful, told me about a shortcut through Sterling that might save us time. I sipped the coffee. It was good, better than most truck stop coffee, but something nagged at me about Elena's conversation with the clerk. The way she'd positioned herself so I couldn't see her face, the way the clerk had glanced out at my truck multiple times. "What else did you two talk about?" I asked. Elena opened the atlas and pointed to a route marked in red ink. "Just directions," and I asked if he'd seen a blue Honda with Colorado plates. That's what Marcus was driving when he took the kids. And had he? He thought maybe, yesterday morning, heading west on Highway 138. Back on the road, Elena's story started changing in small ways. First, it was the restraining order date. She'd said earlier it was issued 3 days ago, but now she mentioned it was from last week. Then it was the children's ages. Emma was 8, but now Elena referred to her as being 7 when school started last month. Diego went from 6 to 5 and back to 6 again in the span of 20 minutes. I tried to tell myself I was overthinking things. People under stress mixed up details all the time. But my ex-wife Linda used to do the same thing when she was lying to me about where she'd been or who she'd been with. Small inconsistencies that added up to big problems. "Tell me about Marcus," I said as we crossed into Colorado. "What made him snap and take the kids?" Elena was quiet for so long I thought she'd fallen asleep. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, harder. "He didn't snap. Marcus never snaps. Everything he does is planned, calculated. That's what makes him dangerous." "But you said he took them because of the restraining order." "I said the restraining order was against him. I didn't say that's why he took them." The hair on the back of my neck stood up. "Then why did he take them?" Elena turned to look at me directly for the first time since we'd left Nebraska. "Because he thought I was going to take them first." The pieces weren't adding up, and I was starting to realize I might have made a serious mistake picking up Elena Vasquez. We were 300 miles from Omaha, deep into Colorado with no easy way to turn back. And the woman sitting in my passenger seat was talking about child custody like it was some kind of strategic war game. "I need to make a phone call," I said, pulling into a rest area near Sterling. Elena's hand shot out and grabbed my wrist as I reached for my CB radio. "Who are you calling?" "A friend of mine, another driver. He might have heard something about missing kids or Amber Alerts." "You can't do that." Elena's grip tightened. "If word gets out that I'm traveling with a trucker, Marcus will disappear with Emma and Diego forever. He has friends in the trucking community, remember." I looked down at Elena's hand on my wrist. Her fingernails were short, but they were digging into my skin hard enough to leave marks. This wasn't the grip of someone scared for her children. This was the grip of someone trying to control a situation. "Let go of me," I said quietly. Elena released my wrist but didn't move away. "I'm sorry. I'm just scared. Please don't make any calls yet. We're only a few hours from Denver now." I wanted to believe her, but everything about Elena's behavior was setting off alarm bells. The way she knew exactly which truck stops to avoid. The way she'd manipulated the clerk in North Platte to get information. The way her story kept shifting like sand every time I asked a direct question. "How did you know I'd be at that truck stop in Omaha?" I asked. Elena blinked. "I didn't know. I was just looking for help and yours was the first truck I saw." There were 8 other rigs in that lot. Mine was parked in the back, away from the lights. "You walked straight to it like you knew exactly where you were going." For the first time since I'd met her, Elena looked genuinely rattled. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again. Finally she said, "I saw you get out to check your tires. You looked like someone who might help." "I didn't get out to check my tires." Elena stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her mind working, trying to come up with another explanation. When she spoke again, her voice was different, colder. "You're right," she said. "I knew exactly which truck was yours, Ray Kowalski from Omaha, Nebraska. Divorced father of Sarah, age 26, who works as a nurse in Denver and barely speaks to you anymore. I knew because I needed someone with something to prove, someone who'd want to help a mother find her missing children." The bottom dropped out of my stomach. "How do you know about Sarah?" Elena reached into her sweatshirt pocket and pulled out a cell phone I hadn't seen before. "The same way I know you're 3 payments behind on your truck. The same way I know you haven't called your daughter in 3 weeks. And the same way I know that if you try to turn me in to the police, I'll tell them you offered to help me for money, and then tried to assault me when I refused." I stared at this woman who had completely transformed in front of my eyes. The desperate mother was gone, replaced by someone calculating and cold. "Who are you?" Elena smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I'm exactly who I said I was. I'm just not who you thought I was. And now we're going to Denver, and you're going to help me get those children, because if you don't, your life is going to get very complicated very quickly." As I sat there in that rest area with the Colorado mountains rising in the distance, I realized I wasn't just giving a ride to a desperate mother anymore. I was trapped in my own truck with someone who had planned this whole thing from the beginning, and I had no idea what she really wanted or how far she was willing to go to get it. The rest of the drive to Denver passed in tense silence. Elena had made her position clear, and I spent the remaining hours trying to figure out what I'd gotten myself into and how to get out of it alive. Every truck stop we passed, I considered pulling in and making a run for it, but Elena seemed to read my thoughts. She kept that second phone in her hand like a weapon, occasionally typing messages to someone I couldn't see. When we reached the outskirts of Denver around noon, Elena directed me to a truck stop off Interstate 25. "Park in the back," she said, "away from the cameras." I found a spot behind the main building, near a cluster of abandoned trailers that looked like they'd been sitting there for months. Elena got out first and stretched, looking around like she was checking for something specific. The mountains loomed in the distance, beautiful and intimidating under the afternoon sun. "I need to make a call," Elena said. "Don't do anything stupid while I'm gone." She walked toward the main building, but instead of going inside, she circled around to the side where there was a payphone. Who uses payphones anymore? I watched her dial a number from memory, which told me this call was planned, just like everything else had been. While Elena was distracted, I grabbed my CB radio and switched to channel 19. "Breaker 19, this is Big Bear looking for Tank Williams." "Tank, you out there, buddy?" Static crackled for a few seconds before Tank's familiar voice came through. "Big Bear, this is Tank. Good to hear from you, man. Where you running?" "Denver area." "Tank, I need you to check something for me real quick. Any Amber Alerts or missing children reports in the last week. 2 kids, Emma and Diego, ages 7 or 8 and 5 or 6. "Hold on, let me check the boards." Tank was good with the internet, always checking trucker forums and news sites. After a minute, he came back on. "Big Bear, I'm not seeing anything matching that description. You got a last name?" "Vasquez." "Nothing on Vasquez kids either. Why you asking?" Before I could answer, Elena appeared at my passenger door. She'd moved faster than I expected, and the look on her face told me she'd heard at least part of my conversation. "Tell your friend you'll call him back," she said, climbing into the cab. I keyed the radio. "Tank, I'll catch you later. Thanks for the check. Copy that, Big Bear. Stay safe out there." Elena was staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. "What did he tell you? No Amber Alerts. No missing children reports. That doesn't mean anything. I told you the police won't issue alerts for custody disputes. It means your children aren't officially missing, Elena, which makes me wonder what we're really doing here." Elena was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the mountains. When she spoke, her voice was softer than it had been since we left the rest area. "The children are real," she said. "Emma and Diego are real and they're in danger. But you're right about one thing, I'm not their mother." My blood went cold. "Then who are you?" "I'm their aunt. Marcus is my brother. And the woman he took them from, their real mother, she was hurting them. The pieces started rearranging themselves in my head, forming a picture I didn't want to see. You helped him take the kids. Alina nodded. Carmen, their mother, she has a boyfriend who drinks too much and gets angry. Emma had bruises on her arms when Marcus picked them up for his weekend visit last month. Diego was afraid to speak above a whisper. Marcus couldn't prove anything, but he couldn't send them back either. So you helped him kidnap his own children. We helped him protect his children, but now Marcus is getting scared. He wants to take them to social services, let the system handle it. He doesn't understand that the system failed them already. Carmen knows how to hide the abuse, how to make excuses. If those children go back to her, Diego and Emma will disappear into a system that doesn't care about them. I stared at Alina, trying to process what she was telling me. And what's your plan? Take them yourself. I have friends in Montana, people who can help, who can give Emma and Diego a safe place to grow up. But I need to get to them before Marcus changes his mind and turns them over to the authorities. Alina, that's still kidnapping. You can't just take children because you think you know what's best for them. Alina's face hardened again. Can't I? Where were you when your daughter needed you, Ray? Where was the system when Emma and Diego were being hurt? Sometimes the right thing isn't the legal thing. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut because there was truth in them. I had failed Sarah when she needed me most, too caught up in my own problems to see that my little girl was struggling with the divorce, with feeling abandoned by her father who was always on the road. This is different, I said, but even as I said it, I wasn't sure it was. Alina pulled out her regular phone and showed me more pictures. Emma and Diego, but not the happy photos she'd shown me before. These were different. Emma's arm showed what looked like finger-shaped bruises. Diego had a cut on his lip that looked fresh. In both pictures, the children's eyes held a fear that made my chest tight. Marcus is at the Salvation Army shelter downtown, Alina said. He's planning to turn them over this afternoon. Once he does that, they'll be back with Carmen by tomorrow. Look at those pictures and tell me that's the right thing to do. I looked at the photos again, at those two scared children, and felt something break inside me. Maybe Alina was right. Maybe sometimes the system failed, and maybe sometimes good people had to step outside the law to protect the innocent. What do you need me to do? I heard myself asking. Alina smiled, but this time it looked genuine. Just drive me to the shelter. I'll handle the rest. And then what? You disappear with two kids and I'm left to explain to the police why I helped you. Then you tell them the truth. That you helped an aunt protect her niece and nephew from an abusive situation. That you did the right thing when the system wouldn't. I started the truck, my hands shaking slightly as I put it in gear. As we pulled out of the truck stop and headed toward downtown Denver, I knew I was crossing a line I'd never be able to uncross. But looking at those pictures, thinking about Sarah and all the ways I'd failed her, I couldn't bring myself to stop. The Salvation Army shelter was a modest building in a rough part of town. Alina directed me to park across the street where we could see the entrance. There, she said, pointing to a beat-up Honda Civic in the shelter's parking lot. That's Marcus's car. How do you know he hasn't already turned them over? Because I called him this morning. Told him I was coming to say goodbye to the kids before he gave them back. He's waiting for me. Alina checked her phone one more time, then looked at me. Ray, once I get out of this truck, you can drive away. Forget this ever happened. Or you can help me save two children who have nobody else. I sat there in my truck, engine idling, watching the entrance to that shelter, and knowing that whatever I decided in the next few minutes would define who I really was. In the distance, I could see the Denver skyline reaching toward the mountains, beautiful and indifferent to the choice I was about to make. Alina opened the passenger door. Thank you for getting me this far. She started to climb out, but I reached over and stopped her. Wait, if we're doing this, we're doing it right. Those kids are going to need more than just good intentions. Alina's eyes filled with tears for the first time since we'd left Nebraska. You'll help. I thought about Sarah, about all the times I should have been there for her and wasn't. About Emma and Diego and the fear in their eyes. about the difference between doing what's legal and doing what's right. Yeah, I said, I'll help. But we do this smart and we do it safe. Alina nodded and wiped her eyes. Thank you, Ray. You don't know what this means. As we walked toward the shelter together, I hoped I was making the right choice. But looking back now, I know that sometimes there are no right choices, only necessary ones. The Salvation Army shelter smelled like disinfectant and hope mixed with desperation. Alina led me through the main entrance, past families sitting on folding chairs with their belongings in plastic bags. A woman at the front desk looked up as we approached. "We're here to see Marcus Vasquez," Alina said. "He's expecting me." The woman checked a clipboard and pointed toward a hallway. "Conference room B down the hall, second door on your right." As we walked toward the room, I could hear children's voices coming from behind the door. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure Alina could hear it. Everything about this felt wrong and right at the same time, like standing at the edge of a cliff knowing you had to jump. Alina knocked softly and opened the door. Inside, a man who looked like a younger version of Alina sat at a small table with two children. Emma was coloring in a book while Diego played with a small toy truck. They looked up when we entered and both children smiled when they saw Alina. "Tia Alina," Emma said, jumping up to hug her aunt. Marcus stood up slowly, his eyes moving between Alina and me. "Who's this?" "A friend who gave me a ride," Alina said, hugging both children. "Ray, this is my brother Marcus." Marcus was smaller than I'd expected, maybe 5'8" with tired eyes and calloused hands like mine. He looked like a man who'd been carrying the weight of the world for too long. "Alina, we talked about this," Marcus said quietly. "I'm doing what's best for them. Giving them back to Carmen isn't what's best, and you know it." Marcus glanced at the children, who had stopped playing and were watching the adults with the kind of careful attention kids develop when they've learned that grown-up conversations can change their whole world. "Can we talk outside?" Marcus asked. We stepped into the hallway, leaving the children in the conference room where they could see us through the glass window. Marcus looked exhausted, like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. "Alina, I can't keep running with them," he said. "I don't have the money, I don't have a plan, and sooner or later the police are going to catch up with us. At least if I turn them over to the state, there's a chance they'll investigate the abuse claims." "A chance isn't good enough," Alina said. "Carmen's smart. She knows how to play the system. The kids will be back with her in a week, and next time they might not survive it." Marcus looked at me. "Did she tell you what she's planning?" "She wants to take Emma and Diego to Montana to some friends who'll hide them. That's not protecting them, that's making them disappear forever." "Is that such a bad thing?" I asked. Both siblings looked at me in surprise. "I mean, if these kids are really being abused, maybe disappearing is better than going back into a system that's already failed them once." Marcus shook his head. "You don't understand. Alina's been off her medication for 3 months. She's not thinking clearly about this." Alina's face flushed red. "Don't you dare use my mental health against me. Everything I've done has been to protect those children." "I know you think that," Marcus said gently. "But taking them to Montana isn't protection, it's running away. And eventually, we'll get caught, and then what happens to Emma and Diego?" Through the window, I could see the children watching us argue. Emma had her arm around Diego's shoulders, and they both looked scared. These weren't the faces of children who felt safe or protected. They looked like kids who'd learned not to trust the adults in their lives to make good decisions. "What if there was another way?" I said. Both Alina and Marcus looked at me. "What if we could get the kids into a safe place legally, document the abuse, build a case that would actually stick?" Alina shook her head. "We tried that. The court gave Carmen custody anyway." "Because you didn't have enough evidence," I said. "But look at them now. They've been away from the abuse for weeks. Kids that age, they'll talk if they feel safe. And there are people who know how to help them do that safely." Marcus was nodding slowly. "There's a social worker here, Janet Morrison. She specializes in abuse cases. She's been talking to Emma and Diego since we got here yesterday." "And what has she found?" "Enough to be concerned. Emma told her about Carmen's boyfriend hitting Diego. Diego drew pictures that worry her, but she says they need time to build trust before the kids will tell her everything. Alina was shaking her head. You're both naive. The system doesn't work. It's never worked for kids like Emma and Diego. Maybe not, I said. But running away with them isn't working either. Look at them, Alina. They're scared. They don't understand what's happening or why the adults in their lives keep making decisions without explaining anything. Through the window, I watched Emma helping Diego color a picture. She was being careful to stay inside the lines, the way kids do when they're trying to be perfect so the adults won't get angry. What if we let them choose? I said. Alina and Marcus both stared at me. What if we sit down with them and explain what's happening, tell them about their options and let them have a voice in what happens next? They're children, Alina said. They can't make decisions like this. They're old enough to know when they feel safe and when they don't, I said. And right now, they don't feel safe with any of us because we're all making choices about their lives without including them. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Janet said the same thing, that Emma and Diego need to feel like they have some control over what happens to them. Alina looked through the window at the children, and I could see something shift in her expression. They've never had control over anything. Not with Carmen, not even with us. Then maybe it's time they did, I said. We went back into the conference room and Marcus knelt down next to Emma and Diego. We need to talk to you both about something important, about what happens next. Emma looked up from her coloring book. Are we going back to Mama? That's what we want to talk about, Marcus said. There are some choices we need to make together. For the next hour, we sat in that small room and had the most honest conversation those children had probably ever had with adults. Alina told them about her plan to take them to Montana. Marcus explained about the social worker and the possibility of staying in Denver while the court figured things out. I talked about how sometimes adults made mistakes and how important it was for kids to speak up when they didn't feel safe. Emma listened carefully to everything, asking questions that were too mature for an 8-year-old. Diego mostly stayed quiet, but he nodded when Emma spoke for both of them. Finally, Emma looked at each of us and said, I want to stay here and talk to Janet more. Diego's scared to go back to Mama's house, and I am too. But I don't want to run away either because then we'll always be scared. Alina started crying then, real tears this time, not the manipulative ones from the truck stop. Are you sure, baby? Emma nodded. Janet says she can help us tell people what happened so they'll believe us. And she says if we stay here, you and Uncle Marcus can visit us every day. Marcus called Janet Morrison, and she came to the conference room 20 minutes later. She was a small woman with kind eyes who spoke to Emma and Diego like they were people worth listening to, not just problems to be solved. We can keep them safe here while we build a proper case, she told us. It might take weeks or even months, but we can make sure they don't go back into an unsafe situation. Alina hugged Emma and Diego goodbye, promising to come back the next day. As we walked out of the shelter, she was quieter than I'd ever seen her. I really thought I was doing the right thing, she said as we reached my truck. You were doing what you thought would protect them. That's not wrong even if the method was. Alina stopped walking and looked at me. Why did you help me? Really? I thought about Sarah, about all the ways I'd failed her and all the ways I was still trying to make up for it. Because sometimes we get a second chance to do better. And sometimes helping means stepping back and letting other people be the heroes. 3 months later, Emma and Diego were placed with a foster family that Marcus and Alina both approved of. Carmen's boyfriend was arrested on domestic violence charges, and Carmen entered a treatment program. Alina started seeing a therapist and got back on her medication. Marcus found a job in Denver so he could stay close to the kids. And me? I drove back to Nebraska with a different understanding of what it meant to help people. Sometimes the best thing you can do is give someone a ride toward their destination, even if you're not sure where the road leads. Sometimes protection means building something stable instead of running away from something dangerous. I called Sarah when I got home, and for the first time in years, We talked for more than 5 minutes. I told her about Alina and the kids, about learning the difference between rescuing someone and supporting them. Sarah listened without judgment, and when I finished, she said something that stuck with me. "Dad, you can't save everyone, but you can show up when it matters." 2 weeks later, Sarah came to visit me in Omaha. We didn't solve all our problems in one weekend, but we started talking about them honestly for the first time since her mother and I divorced. It was a beginning, which is sometimes all you can ask for. I still drive the same routes, still stop at the same truck stops. But now when I see someone who looks like they need help, I think twice about what kind of help they really need. Sometimes it's a ride. Sometimes it's a phone call. And sometimes it's just someone willing to listen while they figure out their own way forward. The road teaches you things if you're willing to pay attention. It taught me that there's a difference between being a hero and being helpful, between saving someone and supporting them while they save themselves. It taught me that family isn't just about blood or obligation, but about showing up consistently with love and respect. Most importantly, it taught me that sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is help them find the courage to choose their own path, even when that path leads somewhere you can't follow.